we have conference realignment. Just dropped. Like, this is all happening on the West Coast. They're doing this at like 6 a.m. West Coast time. The Pac-12, the Pac-2, the 2-pack is going to be the 6-pack.
I remember when I was thinking about getting here and taking this job with you, thinking about how much of a challenge it would be to do a pod every single day.
Nope.
And let me just frankly put it out there. I'm an idiot.
There's always something.
There's always something. Yeah. So big news, realignment. I have some takes like always. But why don't you run them through what's going on, and then I'll start blazing the microphone.
Yes. Here's what is happening. So the Pac-12, which is the 2-pack, which is Oregon State and Washington State. Remember how I was saying all along, I thought they were going to wind up merging with the Mountain West, and they would then use the Pac-12 intellectual property and it would become the Pac-12 because that has more brand recognition. Well, they're not going to do it that way. And it sounds like the Mountain West put a little too much pressure on them early, and the 2 Pac-12 schools realized they had some leverage here, and so they decided to use it. So what they're going to do is they're going to cherry pick the best of the Mountain West. So they're taking Boise State, Fresno State, Colorado State, and San Diego State. That gets them to 6. Now, the magic number here is 8, and that's not necessarily a football number. That's an NCAA number for that's what you need to get a full share from the basketball tournament, basically. And so they have a provisional right now that they, because of what happened to them, but they need to get back to 8. And so this will get them to 6. They're not done. So they've said this is a phase 1 situation, and they will add more. I don't think they're adding more from the Mountain West. I don't think that's the plan. I think that they're looking around, maybe like a Memphis or a UTSA, so a school like that. But
because conference realignment wouldn't be complete unless there's something geographically inaccurate involved.
Well, exactly. But there's also, and this is where it gets really spicy and potentially juicy. What 2 would make the most sense in the Pac-12? Who make the least sense in the conference they're in now?
Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
Cal and Stanford.
Yeah.
So is something going to happen in the ACC? Because Cal and Stanford are in the ACC now, and you would think they're not leaving the ACC unless something happens. But this says maybe something happens because we've talked about Florida State and Clemson. The lawsuits are the lawsuits. Clemson is suing the ACC in South Carolina. The ACC is suing Clemson in North Carolina. Florida State is suing the ACC in Florida. The ACC is suing Florida State in North Carolina. Like, that has not been resolved and will not be resolved for a little bit. But let's say it gets resolved in a way where Clemson and Florida State can buy their way out. If you're Cal and Stanford, you will be like, hey, look, there's this other place where, we still have the patches for the jerseys.
Yeah, they're still somewhere in the equipment room.
And we don't have to fly to Boston and Pittsburgh.
Yeah. It is interesting because the thing about realignment is that you're always taking the latest round or news and trying to extrapolate what that means for the next round, because it never ends. And, it is interesting because you can kind of look into the future, Andy, and see, well, what is the ACC going to look like in 5 years if it even exists, right? Because there's, like you said, legal battles and all that stuff. But it does make sense, and it would be kind of great if the Pac-12 was able to reinstill some geographical relevance to this whole thing. So, I mean, I do think that they would make sense culturally in that conference, obviously. And it would be cool to bring some West Coast football back. But here's my take on just the initial news. You like Bennigan's, right?
Who doesn't like Bennigan's? Who doesn't want to?
When's the last time you ate at Bennigan's?
That would probably be like 2004 at the one on Bruce B. Downs in Tampa.
Yeah, so like in the early 2000s, they were still pretty alive and well. And then
very much
2005,
it was hopping, man.
Okay. There are still a few locations of Bennigan's open, and actually on our route, because we are driving from Nashville to Madison for the Alabama game this weekend, there is a Bennigan's in Illinois somewhere, if you wanted to go out of your way to relive the magic. But I see a lot of, yay, the Pac-12 is back tweets And I kind of feel like they're going to have the logo and they're going to be called the Pac-12.
Yep.
But like, is Bennigan's Bennigan's.
So you're saying this is like a Kenny Rogers Roasters in Thailand situation.
Yes. Like, I think that it's like, we'll get the brand back, but is the brand still the brand? You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's some media companies that come to mind of like, they use a brand, but they're not what they used to be. I don't know if
I work for one?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
You could think of that.
All right.
But the interesting part about this is, as you said, though, if this is another first step in more dominoes falling down the line.
It is. And so Nathan in the chat wants to sneak into Dear Andy and Dear Ari here. He says, with the Mountain West teams going to the Pac-12, will FCS teams backfill the Mountain West? And if so, which? My money's on the Montana schools, San Diego State, and North Dakota State. Very good guess, Nathan. And you are extrapolating very well, because that is exactly what the Mountain West is going to do. They are going to probably try to elevate some FCS schools. And I think the ones you mentioned, Montana State, the Beth Dutton's favorite school, the Fighting Bobcats of Montana State. And then I don't know about North Dakota State and South Dakota State, because I think they've kicked around the idea of going up to FBS for a while, but I almost wonder if they're just better off being the best programs in the FCS. I don't know. Like, not everybody needs to chase that, but I do think the Montana schools, it would make sense. Do you bring back Idaho back into the FBS? Because, they, in the WAC days, Idaho actually had some good years there in the early 2000s as an FCS school. So that's a potential one. But yeah, that would make sense. And I think they're going to try to make it make some geographic sense if they can, but that's a tough spot for them to be in. It's crazy, because everybody felt so bad for Washington State and Oregon State, and rightfully so, because of what happened to them. Well, they're just doing that to somebody else now.
Yeah, well, it's just like kind of the food chain. So there's two things I want to ask you. Well, one's more of a question, and one's more of a like leading the conversation to the next thing. But does this bring back any warm and fuzzy feelings for you when it comes to like West Coast football and Pac-12 football?
No, because there's no Oregon, there's no Washington, there's no USC, there's no UCLA. The Arizona schools are gone. Now the Arizona schools had to be dragged. Well, Arizona State especially had to be dragged kicking and screaming into the Big 12. So would they consider it? I don't know. I think they're better off in the Big 12, like, especially your alma mater, for basketball reasons. Like, the Big 12 is the ultimate basketball league right now. Yeah. And Arizona would probably want to stay in there. So I think that the ones that went to the Big 12 probably pretty happy with where they are. The one that didn't make sense is Cal and Stanford, and obviously they had to do what they had to do. But we'll see what happens with the ACC down the road. But it's different.
Yeah. So also too, they changed the playoff, right? Yes. When the Pac-12
and
disappeared.
They're talking about, hopefully if they can get to 8, that they will get CFP money out of that, and then they'll get
it's the automatic
conference CFP money. And
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So if they get can they make a power conference out of this new Pac-12? And do they have to rechange the rules back to 5 automatic bids if this all?
I mean 6 automatic.
6, sorry. Yeah. So it changed to 5.
Yeah.
But 4 of the top rated power conferences, that's how they had to alter it, because there were no longer 5 power conferences. Like, does the Pac-12 command any sort of this new built Pac-12?
I don't think so, because it's basically the Mountain West.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
And it's not as strong as, say, the American was before UCF and Cincinnati and Houston went to the Big 12. So no, it is in no way a power conference, and I'm sure they're going to try.
Yeah,
but they're not going to get it.
But down the line, in this made up scenario, because this is a podcast and it's fun to make made up scenarios. But if they do find their way into getting Stanford and Cal back over there, or something crazy happens and the Arizona schools return, like, I guess it is within possibility that the Pac-12 could reassert itself down the line as a power conference.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that they're going to have the juice. Kale asked, was it naive of the Mountain West not adding the Pac-1-2 right away, mostly for the sake of protecting themselves? I think they tried, Kale. I think they tried. I think Teresa Gould, who's the commissioner of the Pac-12 right now, I think that she did a really good job navigating this, understanding that the leverage was still there for Washington State and Oregon State because the Pac-12 branding still valuable, especially compared to the Mountain West intellectual property. So that, I think, is why that didn't happen is they realized, hey, we've got some leverage in this. We don't have to just take whatever deal the Mountain West offers us. We can just take the best of the Mountain West, which is what they did. It's a nasty game, man.
Yeah,
nasty work.
Yeah. People are always making moves behind the scenes, and it's a never-ending thing, it feels like. So, I mean, this is the first step. Now we'll see who else they try to add, and then, of course, we'll see in 2 or 3 years if anything happens with the ACC, and we'll be sitting in these chairs and talking about it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we are, of course, presented by Wendy's. We had some delicious Saucy Nuggs for lunch. We tried every flavor of Saucy Nuggs. We got a video about that. We'll have to let the people see our breakdown of the Saucy Nuggs.
It was a versatile lineup.
Yeah.
And also very tasty. But the thing I liked about it the most is that there was variance in spice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When it came to the flavors, which I think kind of adds a little extra.
Yeah, we'll break it all down.
Yeah.
We are also sponsored by Prime Video, which has the money game, which is something that aimed at the folks who watch this show. Like the people who watch this show are going to love the money game. 6-part documentary series following the athletes at LSU all through last year. So you got Jayden Daniels as he's winning the Heisman. You've got Livvy Dunne as she's becoming just a mega star, influencer, gymnast. You've got Angel Reese as she is trying to defend a national championship and get ready to go into the WNBA. It's just really interesting stuff on Prime Video. So much behind the scenes access. The part I thought was really interesting in the first couple of episodes, you get a lot of behind the scenes of Jayden Daniels in that LSU Alabama game last year. And then as remember he took that big hit that knocked him out, as he's getting ready for the LSU Florida game after that. It was really interesting look behind the scenes there. So if you want to watch, if you're already subscribed to Prime Video, there's a link in the show description that you're watching on YouTube right now. Just click that link. It'll take you right to the money game. If you have not signed up for Prime Video yet, what are you even doing? You got to get the Rings of Power. You got to watch Roadhouse, and you also have to watch the money game. So click that link. It'll help you get signed up, and you'll be good to go. Watch the money game on Prime Video. All right, Ari. Now we need to talk about, this is going to be our new Thursday thing. These availability reports.
Yeah.
So you've got the SEC and the Big Ten are doing them. Couple of SEC conference games this week. It'll really hit next week when almost everybody's playing conference games. But you've got LSU, South Carolina. You've got Texas A&M-Florida. Texas A&M-Florida is the really interesting one because you and I were talking about Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway. We talked about it all week. Graham Mertz did not appear on the availability report, which is a good thing for your availability because it means you are available. He's not questionable, he's not doubtful, and he is not out. So Billy Napier has a choice to make. I've said my piece on this. I think he's going to go a different direction, but I think Graham Mertz probably winds up starting.
Yeah, I have also said my piece on this. I disagree with that, but it also kind of felt like the writing was on the wall if he was able to go. Like the fact that he's not even on it, is just an illustration that, I mean, I take that as he's 100%, right? That he's ready to play. So, I don't know what the plan was going into the season for Florida and whether or not they thought there was a chance at the beginning of the year, had they lost to Miami, that they would make a change at the starting quarterback. I think the plan was that DJ would play a lot. But in terms of which quarterback is the first to trot out onto that field on Saturday, I'm fairly certain, it feels like anyway, that Graham Mertz is going to be that guy.
Now, there was a surprise name on it on the Florida side, and that's Eugene Wilson, who is Florida's most dynamic receiver. And he had his breakout game against Samford. Now, obviously, it was against Samford, but the imagination starts to run wild seeing DJ Lagway throwing passes to Eugene Wilson because he has kind of that human joystick capability, you think. And you finally got to see him catching balls in stride down the field. Well, he's questionable now. And Nick Del Torre from On3's Gators Online reported that he got hurt on Monday. And so we don't exactly know how much he can be used. It may be something he can just play through. But just another thing for Florida and Billy Napier. Like, oh, come on.
Because you're already questioning whether or not Florida has enough skill talent for a place like Florida, and then the best one gets injured. You really hope he'd want to play. And it's like you said this just now, but like the imagination does run wild. And like that is the good stuff. That's what Billy Napier needs. He needs people's imaginations to run wild.
Yeah.
Because you can imagine him being employed next year, which is another,
there's another thing we need to imagine here, because I had a friend who is a big Texas A&M fan texting me yesterday and saying, who do you think wins? And I said, I'm not really sure. I picked Texas A&M but it's a very tight spread. I'm not super confident in that pick. And they said, this is a must win for us too, referring to the Aggies.
Sure.
And you had been mentioning that, and I hadn't thought about it that way, but this almost feels like the run up to the Florida Miami game all over again, where whoever loses is melting down.
Yeah. So the question is, who melts down more now? And I think that you could make the case that's going to be A&M fans if they come up short, because one, Florida has been living in a land of
they've been
sadness,
living in hell since the Miami game. Yeah, you can say it.
Yes, they've been living in hell. And when you're living in hell, sometimes it just can't get worse, and sometimes it is what it is. Like, where things stand. And if Florida comes out, they play Graham Mertz, and they lose this game, just more of the same that they're already feeling. Like for A&M, and this was true coming into the season. It's like, we did not really know who they were, Andy, or who they were going to be.
Right.
And I think anytime you have a roster that does have guys on it, like they have a lot of good players.
Yeah.
And you take
the Senior Bowl watch list, they had 20 guys on it. 20.
Yeah.
That's second most to Ole Miss, and it's tied with Georgia.
I think that the veteran presence on that team mixed with some young talent is the reason why their over-under win total for the year was at 8.5. So, there was a thought process coming into the year that, Mike Elko's already turned around another program. That if you were to infuse, then it's the same kind of thing that I talk about with Nebraska, like infuse some functionality to it.
Yeah.
That you could take those pieces and really overachieve. So the question really is, now that they've lost to Notre Dame, a loss that looks a lot worse now than it did when it happened, if they turn around and lose to Florida, do your mind start to imagine negative things about Mike Elko? How much responsibility do you place on his shoulders in year one? And what should have been, or what are reasonable expectations for what A&M was supposed to be this year? Because with A&M, I get it. There's always next year. It's like next year's always the year. And it's just at a certain point, a proud, loud, excited fan base just cannot take it anymore. And I feel like Mike Elko is going to catch the brunt at the beginning of this year for underachieving or not playing well. That Jimbo Fisher, like people were angry coming into the year. Right. It wasn't like
this is what he inherited. This is not, and he went out and got what he could get. And Nick Scorton's a great get out of the transfer, but really he's got to deal with what he inherited from Jimbo Fisher for the most part.
Yeah. And here's a theory I've had about A&M for a long time, and I want you to walk down this aisle with me. Walk down this path. Maybe one day, you never know.
Okay.
But when you look at A&M's roster and you look at the fact that they had high hopes for a coach, like you saw Dabo Sweeney running around. Like, when I say high hopes for a coach, I mean like a brand name person that strikes immediate excitement.
Because that worked so well the last time.
Yeah, but like that's what, like it or not, that's what fans wanted.
I know.
And I think fans crave and want familiarity. So because A&M got somebody who was familiar with the program, but wasn't necessarily like a sexy superstar when it comes to like brand and name, if the leash of benefit of the doubt is much lower, because they come into the season agitated already. They're agitated that they had the greatest recruiting class on paper of all time 2 or 3 years ago, and it's already not going to pan out. They are agitated because they had a lot of good players on their team and they never could put it together because their coach was stubborn offensively. Jimbo Fisher, I'm talking about. And now they're probably mildly agitated because a place that has more money than most programs, a lot of oil money down there, wasn't able to go make a splash that brought in a name that was recognizable and proven. Now, I don't think that's rational because I don't know who that person is. And I think that actually hiring somebody who's proven to be a good football coach would actually do that place some good. But I don't feel like Mike Elko takes over at A&M during a time where people are at the peak of rationality. Like, I think that he's taking over at a very turbulent time. And even though he has had next to no time to flip the roster completely and put them in a position to compete for SEC championships, like if you start the year losing to Notre Dame, a team that lost to NIU, and then turn around and lose to Florida, a team that's basically like on complete fire right now. Like, as a A&M fan, I mean, you're Surrender Cobraing too, right? Like, I mean,
exactly.
like,
And there's a small sample size problem here because like Florida looked awful against Miami. But what if Miami is awesome? Like, what if Miami is a true national title contender? We just don't know that yet because we haven't seen him play anybody else.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's also on the table for sure. And like the first part of the season is always about putting together the pieces of context that we don't have. And, you know, I am wondering too, like, what if Clemson is an 11-win team that happened to run into a buzzsaw? Like, there's a lot of these examples around college football, but you want to know what? When you've invested as much money as A&M has, both in the roster and the buyout and the coach, and you lose 2 times in your first 3 games, I think we have some pretty good context on Notre Dame, like that.
That sample size is a little different.
So, like, I don't know that even if they were playing Alabama on Saturday and they were to lose, like, it would be really, really upsetting. So they're not playing Alabama; they're playing a very deeply flawed team.
Yeah,
because even if Miami is a national championship contender, I think that Florida's warts travel, to borrow your word. I don't know that those are things that you just erase because you played a really good team. They were not competitive in the game.
Right. And specifically not competitive on both lines of scrimmage, which I feel like that's the part that
it was an opener and it was at home. And even if Miami turns out to be, because I have them ranked in the top 5, like, I have a lot of respect and excitement for Miami. I just think that in that specific scenario, Florida should have shown some more fight if they were even kind of good. You know what I mean? Like, I think we know what Florida is.
So if Florida were to beat A&M here, if you're an A&M fan,
I don't know there's a way to frame it that makes you feel good.
You're wanting to just bury your face in a fuego taco and never come out.
Yeah. And like, I don't know that Mike Elko is going to catch the brunt of hot seat discussions. We're not going to go down that road, I don't think. I hope not. But at the same time too, you know how quickly you can lose fan sentiment. You already had people who aren't necessarily paying attention to college football all day, every day, who were probably underwhelmed by the hire just because, like I said, the lack of brand. And then you come out and go 1-2. Like, that's just a tough pill to swallow. And then all of a sudden you're putting your coach, who's literally just got on campus like 6 months ago, well, actually almost a year now, time goes fast, into a pressure cooker. Because, like, then next year it's like, what if Connor Wegman's not that dude? Like, what do you do to replace some of the guys that you're going to lose? Like, well, I mean,
if they win this game, there might be some guy from nearby Willis,
Texas. Yeah.
So
maybe the best part about this game is win or lose, you just give them that extra like 3-second hug. You know, you grab onto those pads a little bit. Yeah, one of these.
How's your mama in there?
Yeah,
exactly.
Really good watching you play out there. You got a bright future ahead of you.
Yeah. Oh, all of this is going to be a mess. This whole Saturday, they're like 3:30 Saturday in the swamp. That's going to be a mess. For somebody,
because there's 2 different types of inherent interest. It's, 2 really good teams playing each other. Who's going to win, and what does this mean for the future? And it's also like, okay, there's 2 trash cans on fire. Which one's going to catch most of the flame? Like, and I don't think that A&M is that, but I think that Florida is that.
But I think A&M fans will feel that way.
They will feel that way, and I think that feeling that way is a transferable thing. Year over year. Yeah, so they're already in the dumps,
right? Because they could lose this game, and like, you're in a first year under a new coach, they could turn it around.
I think they're tired of talking about turning it around. I think they just want to get off to a hot start. So.
All right, Ari, we got to talk numbers, because our friends at PrizePicks have put out the board for this college football week, and there are some key numbers in some key games that we've been looking at the last couple of days that I think are absolutely fascinating. And so PrizePicks, by the way, you download that app, best daily fantasy game in America. use code Staples. You play $5. You get $50 instantly. So let's talk about some of these numbers. I am looking at LSU South Carolina, and I am looking at the number for LSU running back Josh Williams, 44.5 rushing yards. And then if you're playing PrizePicks, you decide, I think he will run for more than this, or I think he will run for less than this. You choose that square. You pick at least 2 squares. You pick more squares. The more you pick, the more the potential payout. But I'm talking about this particular square right now. Josh Williams, 44.5 rushing yards. If it's more than, I think it is a good sign that LSU is winning this game. If LSU cannot effectively run the ball, they could very easily lose at Williams-Brice Stadium.
What does that number tell you?
It tells me that they don't feel particularly confident that he's going to run for a lot of yards.
I think that number tells you that LSU can't run the football this year.
Well, exactly.
I think that's literally what that says.
You've got 2 first-round offensive tackles. You've got a veteran interior offensive line. At some point, do you assert your will and a back bust loose for a 100-yard game?
I mean, you could, as you know, you could break off a run and get there. But the thing that I think is most interesting about this is that if LSU's running game was in peak form and this was a team that was able to win at a high level, that would be a terrible game at that number. Like that's like a baseline of like, if this is going to happen.
And that scares me for LSU. Like,
sure.
And we both picked LSU in this game, but I'm the more this goes, the more I worry that I may have been wrong on that one.
Well, also too, we picked the game before we got some of these PrizePicks numbers to contextualize it. So like that, I mean, that makes me nervous looking at that.
Yeah. All right. Let's look at Georgia, Kentucky. And this is a game that I don't think we're concerned about who's going to win this game. I think we know Georgia's going to win this game. I want to see, does Kentucky show signs of life after what happened against South Carolina? Because that is as bad of a performance by a team that had high hopes for a season as I can remember. Well, I guess it really dates back to 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago
when Florida played Miami. But that was the egg that was laid there, because there were, in my mind, going into Florida Miami, I could imagine Miami dump trucking Florida. I could not have imagined South Carolina doing what it did to Kentucky. And I feel like rewatching that game, a lot of that was Kentucky's fault. Like, that wasn't South Carolina being dominant. That was Kentucky being awful.
Yeah.
So what do we get from Kentucky? And the Brock Vandagriff number here, 129.5 yards. He threw for 30 against South Carolina. He's now going up against his former team, which has a much better defense than South Carolina. But you look at to steal your line about the LSU rushing totals. I mean, if you can't throw for more than 130 yards, what are you even doing?
Well, the problem too is that we don't know that he's going to play the whole game.
Well, exactly.
So he got pulled. So when your quarterback is being pulled, that's a tough thing to try to predict. But the thing I will say is that, during Kentucky's good years when they face Georgia, like, it turns into a flattening more often than not.
Yeah.
And I mean, by more often, I mean like every time.
Yeah.
So now you come in when sentiment is down, and it looked like you couldn't do even basic fundamental things the previous weekend. It's just kind of like, what is a victory for UK on Saturday? What does
show
that look
some
like?
fight?
Like,
show
be
some
in a
signs of life
game in the third quarter and like hit hard and be on assignment and just like be a team that like cares.
Yeah.
Because it didn't even look like they looked like they were going through the motions.
The defense looked so confused against South Carolina. Like, there were guys running open, and that defense is not usually like that. Brad White does a good job. They're usually in the right places. Like, nothing made sense last week. So Gavin Wimsatt is the backup, the former Rutgers starter. So
highly rated prospect from Kentucky who went to Rutgers and returned back. Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. One more number I want to throw at you, and that's from Texas A&M at Florida. Le'Veon Moss, the Texas A&M running back. His number is 70.5 rushing yards. And my thinking on this, Ari, is if it's more than, then you are looking at a pretty comfortable Texas A&M win, because they have dominated on the lines of scrimmage.
Yeah, well, I think that's the number one question about Florida, really. I mean, not the number one question, but the question that we haven't been talking enough about is, where is Florida's line play?
Right.
Because
their
the
D-line looked terrible against Miami.
terrible.
So what are we going to see against Texas A&M, which does not, we don't think, have as good of an offensive line as Miami?
And you can also have a pretty solid ability to stop the run without ever having a good pass rush, because those are very different, jobs. So I don't know how much you can extrapolate on Cam Ward's jersey not ever being touched in the entire Miami game, but I don't come into the Florida game with a ton of confidence that this defense is going to get after it.
Yeah.
Connor Wegman, if he has the time back there, like, we could see a whole new Connor Wegman too, because as you know, when there's no one in your face, it's a lot easier to go through your progressions and to go through your reads and to make good decisions and move the football. So, I'm not high on Florida's defense either, even though the number one discussion point always is what to do with the quarterback.
So Connor Wegman's PrizePicks number, by the way, 200.5 passing yards.
And if he goes more than 200.5, then Texas A&M wins. I think that's more telling
than
even the rushing yard.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, if you like any of those squares that we just talked about, you can play those. But there's one that PrizePicks is going to offer you that should just make things a little bit easier. Every weekend in September, you get a free Caleb Williams square. So remember, they do all the sports. So you just click the NFL tab. There's a Caleb Williams square, 0.5 passing yards more than. And so if he throws for a yard, you win that square. So if you're feeling super confident about one of the ones we've talked about, just tag that with the Caleb Williams square, and you're feeling really good about the way you're playing. So use that code Staples, play 5, get 50 instantly. That's PrizePicks. All right. It is Dear Andy time. Your questions answered by us. Let's start out with one from Justin. James Earl Jones, who passed away at age 93 this week, may he rest in peace, has many acting credits to his portfolio, but he's mostly known, I don't know if he's mostly known, but very well known for voicing Darth Vader. Saban and Harbaugh have left college football. Who is the Darth Vader of college football? And could there be multiple Vaders in college football? And this is where I wish I had asked producer River to have that bleeped Kirby Smart speech ready. Because instead of
just beep, beep,
it would just be, I've been waiting for this my whole life. Offense, kick their ass. Defense. That's the sound of college football's Darth Vader. Kirby Smart is college football's Darth Vader. There's no question about this.
Okay, so I think we might have our first major disagreement.
What?
On our show? But I have to ask for context.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Is Darth Vader just the villain, or is it like a multifaceted, layered?
Ari's never seen
I don't
movies.
know.
Oh,
I didn't know that James Earl Jones was the voice of Darth Vader till just right now, and I don't know. Guys, I don't like this. It's not my thing. I'll never be a Star Wars dude. Okay, but I'm saying, like, do people just? Is this a funny way of saying the villain?
Well, Darth Vader was the villain, and
I know there's some weird family tree stuff going on there. So
spoilers for a movie that came out in, well, I guess it was Empire Strikes Back. So spoilers for a movie that came out in 1980. But yeah, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father.
Yes.
He is former Jedi Anakin Skywalker. He was a good guy who was then turned into a bad guy.
Did he become a bad guy in the movies?
By Emperor Palpatine, yes. By
Palpatine?
Yes.
I think I got some of that to stop my daughter's throw up.
He's a Sith Lord.
Yeah.
Always there are two.
Palpatine for bad gas and throw.
All right.
Okay. I'm
so
sorry.
Yes. So
is it just the villain?
It's the villain.
Okay.
Well, and it's not the villain. It's the force that seems unstoppable. So when you meet Darth Vader in A New Hope, you don't. How in the world can anyone overcome this? That's how you feel about the Darth Vader of college football.
Okay, well, that's two multifaceted things. So, yes, I agree with you that Georgia is that entity.
Yeah.
But is Kirby Smart a villain?
I think he's a villain to everybody who is trying to beat Georgia. I actually wrote this.
I think that Kirby Smart's a very likable dude.
Oh, trust me. He's one that you like. If he was my team's coach, I'd love him. But if you ask Florida people, if you ask Alabama people, Alabama people like him because he was their defensive coordinator, but anybody who, if he's in their way.
Yeah, but that's true for anybody. Who's the, like Jim Harbaugh last year, people did not like him.
But Nick Saban, everyone respected, but everyone feared him like Darth Vader.
Right, but who was Darth Vader last year?
It wasn't Jim Harbaugh.
Because I feel like so we're not talking just about pure villains here, because like
Nick Saban was the force that how do you overcome
okay,
this?
all right. So I'm just trying to work through Star Wars stuff here, because I do think that Kirby Smart, like, I don't know that other fans, and I don't see it a lot, I could be wrong, but like I don't know that USC fans are like, God, I hate Kirby Smart.
I don't know.
I don't know that like Ohio State fans are like, God, I hate Kirby Smart.
Let's turn that over to the chat. How
do people hate Kirby Smart? I respect his success, and he is like
Goat Dog. Saban was Palpatine. All right, River, play that speech.
Trust your preparation. Yo is prepared for this for 365 days. I think about that locker room. Think about getting our opportunity. All you went through this week to get ready for this game. Now is when you pay the price. You go out there with energy, enthusiasm. Hey guys, ain't nobody in this room should be cautious. Ain't nobody in this room should be nervous about. Go out here. Don't think about scoreboard. Don't think about. You think about knocking. Did you hear what Box said on Monday? When I sat I wanted to right then. Tore out here. 2 years pride and joy tells me guys up. You go play the right way. You play the right way. You knock. You stay out the. You tackle the ball. It's easy. Look at the right. Punish on offense and kick special teams, guys. It's about who we are. I believe in you. Let's go.
sounds like my CPAP machine. No, seriously though. Like I'm reading the
How
comments.
are you not
here.
afraid of that if you are a team that aspires to win the national title?
I just think it's easy to admire. Like I don't think like I would despise that person.
But are you afraid of it?
Then yes, if that's like because like okay, so it's not just pure villain, because I feel like there are people
fear.
Like Kirby Smart on the list of most unlikable coaches in college football, I think is relatively low.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people just hate the best and that's just it. Like Nick Saban did get hated, but like did people just like despise Nick Saban?
Yes.
Okay. So like I don't know that Kirby Smart is there, and I actually think watching that video is more proof of like why he's cool. Like
well,
I like
you
that.
would want him to be your team's coach, but
yeah,
if you need to beat him, you will fear him
but people
or hate
don't
him.
View Kirby the way they viewed Urban Meyer.
Yeah, they do. You don't live around Florida fans. I do.
Urban Meyer was not a very liked person across the board from coast to coast. I understand
you
regional
you
rivalries.
are looking at likability from a standpoint of we get to know these guys. You got to think about it like a fan.
Well, I know, but you live in a rivalry zone. I'm saying like let's use like teams that aren't impacted by Georgia very often. Like, do Arizona State fans have an opinion about Jim Harbaugh? Did they have an opinion about
everybody
Urban Meyer?
has an opinion about Jim Harbaugh?
I think that they did. Like, I don't know that like an ASU fan is like, God, I just cannot stand Kirby Smart. Like, I just don't think that's real. And it's an interesting thought, but I do have like a actual thought about like villains of the sport and who could be villains.
Who's that?
Like, I think Lincoln Riley could be a villain.
Yes, I agree.
Like, I think people don't like how that Oklahoma US, like there's a reason to
Brian
not like
Kelly
him.
can be a
Brian
villain.
Kelly is a villain. I mean, I think Dabo Sweeney, if his team ever gets good again, could be a villain to a certain extent. But I also think that like guys like Dan Lanning, who smoked cigars on National Signing Day and made that video on purpose of pregame of Colorado, we're fighting for wins, not clicks. Like Dan Lanning has that like edge to him too. He just hasn't won yet to put it out there yet. But like there's some guys out there that have a little sense of I like him, I don't like him, that have nothing to do with how good their football team or is how well they recruit.
Well, Lane.
Yeah.
But I think Lane can go either way depending on how you feel.
Yeah, some people love Lane and some people don't. But like nobody's opinion of Lane Kiffin is like, God, Ole Miss is just too good. Like their opinion is of him, his past, and who he is as a person.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you know what? I'll go watch Star Wars. I'm not going to do that.
All right. Our next question comes from JS. Who wins more national championships over the next 5 years? Kirby Smart, Ryan Day, and Kalen Deboer, or the field?
Am I doing it right?
I think so. There you go. You got it.
I mean, there's no other way to answer this question, dude. Like you want to be like different, go be different. But like I'm taking Kirby Smart. Like, what are we doing?
Well, no. It's those three together or the field.
Kirby Smart.
You think Kirby Smart will win more than all of them? Plus, that's not the question. The question is, Kirby Smart plus Ryan Day plus Kalen Deboer. everybody else.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was too busy doing the. Well, that was a snore. Probably the power coaches.
Yeah, I don't even think this is a question. Like, or
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a question. I don't think there's a debate to be had here. I think they will over the next 5 years, because I would say those three, I would bet they account for at least 3 national titles in the next 5 years, and that makes it impossible for the field to have more.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's a certain few coaches in that category that I think could make it interesting. Like Dan Lanning is in the field. But
Lane
Kiffin's in the field, and like this is an interesting year. Mario Cristobal's in the field. Billy Napier's in the field.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but I mean,
yeah.
It's not. I don't know if it's open and shut, but there's no way that you could.
Lincoln
pick
Riley's
field.
in the field.
Lincoln Riley's in the field. Like you have a lot of teams that are pretty good this year that are in the field. So
James Franklin's in the field.
Yeah, James Franklin's in the field. Who are we forgetting?
I still think it's those 3 guys.
Yeah.
It's just to like, you could have probably given me Kirby Smart and Ryan Day, and I probably would have.
Yeah, the Kirby Smart and Ryan Day.
Did you give me Kalen Deboer at
Kalen
Alabama
Deboer
too?
Added into it, yeah. And like, one of those 3 teams do seem like one of the already out of the gate this year. If like I had to bet, like that would be my champion would come from that pool.
So the rest of that question, or part 2 of that question, is the meatball the most appropriately named food?
Yes.
Yes, it is a ball of meat. And it's like, it was search engine optimization before anybody knew what that was. Like this show is called Andy and Ari On3 because I am named Andy. He's named Ari. We work at On3. And so we want you to go, what's that show Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman?
If you literally type in what you would type into Google, that's the name of the show.
Yeah, that's why we named it this. So the meatball, named long before the internet existed, just named perfectly. Hey, what are you making? Balls of meat. Oh,
what are other foods that kind of in that category though? Like cheese stick.
Cheese stick is good. Mozzarella stick.
Yeah, mozzarella stick. That's
version
longer.
of that.
There's too many syllables
yeah.
in that one though.
Chicken nugget.
Chicken nugget is good.
Saucy Nuggs.
Saucy Nuggs is good.
Saucy Nuggs is perfect.
Yeah, no, that I think that because like things like pizza don't work because it doesn't describe what it is.
Yeah, that pizza is an abstract concept.
Yes.
Like, meatball is a ball of meat.
Yeah.
So
yeah, cheese stick's good.
All right.
But meatballs are good.
That's a great question. Great lower third from producer River here. If you're watching in video form, if you're on the podcast, you need to watch the video version every once in a while because you get some treats like this beautiful lower third with a picture of a meatball that says, "Is the meatball the most appropriately named food?"
Mm-hmm.
I love it. All right, next question. This is from Sarang. In your post week 2 playoff predictions, you said not to freak out if a better at-large team is not seated in the top 4 because those are reserved for conference champs. I think the casual who isn't paying attention until later this season is going to freak out. Probably the same for when they realize the 12th seed is likely going to be for the group of 5 rep and not the 12th ranked team. This is more of a comment leading into what revisions would you expect from the committee, or would you like to see in upcoming years about playoff seeding? Do you think they'll explore reseeding so the best teams remain, or do the Bulls want a spicy, saucy nug quarterfinal? For example, if all the lower seeds advance in round 1, is it better to have USC Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl or Ohio State UNLV and gamble on the USC Utah winner versus Ohio State for a semifinal? What if the teams got to pick their opponents? I think the NBA has brought this up for round 1s, but no traction. What if they reseeded the whole bracket instead of just the half you're on? So the reseeding, the NFL does reseeding. Like, they're not going to do that because they have the neutral site games already set, the bowl game. Like, the Bulls want to know who they're getting, which, again, it's stupid that they're doing these in bowls. I'm going to say it again because maybe they can't hear us. It's really stupid that you're doing this in bowls. It should be on campus until the championship game.
So here's the thing about the reseeding. I think we look at the bracket this year, and like I actually posted this on Twitter and people got mad at me. So to me, like I was just like looking ahead at the way that the season could play out. And I thought, well, you could actually make the genuine case that the best thing that could happen to Texas this year is losing to Georgia closely at home, because that would knock them out of the top 4, but they would probably finish somewhere in the 5 unless they had to play
as
them
long
again.
as they don't make the SEC championship game and have to play them again.
Yes, but even so, they could win the first one and lose the second one and then still be in the same scenario. Like losing to Georgia once could be the best thing that happens to them if that lines up perfectly, because you could make the real case that being the 5 seed this year is more advantageous than being the 1 seed, which is stupid. Like it shouldn't be that way.
But yeah, 5 gets to play 12. And if they beat 12, because that's going to be the easiest first round opponent,
then they would presumably play the Big 12 champion in the second round,
or the ACC champion,
or the ACC champion, depending on which one's weaker.
Who probably won't actually be ranked number 4.
And it's within the realm of possibility that the number 1 seed would have to play the Big 10 champ in the second round, right?
Not the champ in the second round.
Oh, sorry, the next great Big 10 team.
Yeah.
Sorry,
or another great SEC team.
They won't play the champ because they'll be. I'm saying like another great team
the
from that
8-9 winner
conference.
is a hell of a lot scarier,
right?
Probably.
So would you rather play an extra game against a team you're favored by 18 to 21 against, and then go out and play the Big 12 or ACC champ, the lowest ranked conference champ, or would you rather not play one game and then end up playing the loser of the Big 10 championship, or the loser of the SEC champion? That stinks. So, but when you get down to reseeding, though, Andy, is how do you possibly do it from a year-to-year basis when some of the best teams and the toughest matchups, you can't predict where they're going to be year over year. Like the second or third best team in college football could conceivably be in the Big 12 one year.
Well, no. Reseeding means at the end of each round of the playoffs, you reseed it
to the lowest.
Yeah.
But like the lowest isn't always going to be the easiest matchup is what I'm saying.
And that's the problem. Deliberately misseeding the bracket makes it impossible to do that. Having it in bowl games makes it impossible to do that.
But like in this system, it's not like the NFL. In the NFL, you seed it based on where you finish, and all the teams are relatively equal once you get to that second and third round of the playoffs. But in college football, if a team is the 10 or the 9 seed, they theoretically could be the third best team in college football.
Right.
So how do you reseed it to avoid?
Well, no, they wouldn't be the third best. The 5th,
but I'm saying
the 5 seed would be the third best.
No, but I'm saying
the 6th seed could be the 4th best.
You're misunderstanding me. There have been years where teams don't make the 4-team field that would have won the national title potentially had they made it. So on paper and record is very different than who they want to play the least.
Yeah.
So the 9th or 8th or 10th seed one year could be a 2 or 3 loss Georgia team that nobody on earth would want to play, but they got hot at the end of the year and made it. And so it's like you can't do a reseeding scenario that automatically creates the easiest path. I'm not talking about stats and records. I'm talking about who do you not want to play. And like the truth serum discussion, like that,
right? And that's
so. Like
Sarong brought that up in the question. Like, I actually think it'd be so much fun if they just asked the 1 seed, "Who do you want to play first?" Like, that would be the most insulting thing ever if they pick you.
But they probably would just pick the 12.
Yeah.
But then in the second round, I guarantee you they're not picking the loser of the Big 10 or the SEC championship game.
Yeah. So
they're probably not picking the 3rd place team in those conferences.
Right. So the choose your own adventure aspect of it would be amazing. They'll never do it.
Could you imagine if they did the choose your adventure and they televised it?
Yes.
That'd be amazing.
Like you have the coaches, like let's say Alabama's the 1 seed. You have Kalen Deboer standing there and you're like, okay, Kalen, who do you want to play first? And who would you want to play the winner of second? And so he'll name those 3 teams. And meanwhile, you have live shots of those 3 teams going,
yeah. Well, the thing that would be really pure comedy is, because it would happen eventually, is that if you picked your adventure and then lost.
Exactly.
Because
it'd be amazing.
I can get yourself.
Be like, we want to play that team. Well, you're going to piss off that team by naming them as the one you want to play.
Yeah.
And so you've now put the target on your back.
But it is kind of interesting, too, of like, what team do we match up with well?
Exactly.
Which team do you think we could run the ball on the best? What's the best thing that we do? How does that match up with the worst thing that they do? Like, I think that would be comedy and that would be highly entertaining. I just don't know how practical it is.
No, I don't think it can.
The question, and somebody asked me this on Reddit the other day when I was doing that Q&A, Andy, but it's like, what is the actual solution to ensuring that the top seeds have the easiest paths? And you want the truth is that there is no easy solution. And the second point here that I'm going to make is, I don't know where we lost it, and you can clip this, River. Go ahead. But we have somehow, in this big scheme of expanding this playoff to 12, lost the plot that this is supposed to be about crowning the national champion, and it's supposed to be really, really hard. So even if your team has a bad route, it happens to people in the NCAA tournament all the time. But if you want to be the national champion of the sport, then beat whoever you're playing. Because this isn't like a everybody love everybody tournament where everybody gets to feel good. If you get a really hard team and you have to beat Georgia in the second round, then beat them if you want to be the national champion and quit crying about it. That's how I feel about it.
You know, that was a very beautiful way of saying that, very forceful. I believe Ric Flair said it better.
Oh, I don't like wrestling.
If you want to be the man, you got to beat the man.
It's true. Like, come on.
True.
Like, I know we're gonna talk a lot about seeding, and there are in this system going to be teams that get jobbed.
Well, what's
just
going to happen? We already know that the SEC and the Big Ten have already said their piece. They would like to go to 14 in 2026. They would like to only have 2 buys, and we all know who's going to get those 2 buys in most years. So I think that's.
But then I'm okay with that because they would have beaten the teams that they played if in the first round anyway, because there aren't really 12 teams good enough to win a national championship in a given year.
But
at most they're 6.
That would take away the deliberate misseeding.
Yeah,
which would probably help.
But I like what do you think about the deliberate misseeding of, like, you're in the playoff committee room and you know who's better? It might not be who has the best record or who accomplished the most, but like, do you think the people in the committee
they did that last year?
Yeah, so
they thought Alabama was better than Florida State.
No, but I'm saying in this new field, do you move teams up and down based on which teams would have the easier path?
Yeah.
Like, do you foresee, like, does the committee have the frame of mind to know that the if Georgia's a 2-loss team for some reason, that no one's going to want to play Georgia in December?
They're just going to rank it the way they see it. And I realize everybody thinks it's a giant conspiracy and that ESPN's pressing a button. I don't think so. I think they're going to rank them the way they feel like they should be ranked.
Yeah, but and the good news is as a viewer, when teams get screwed, because they will. Right. And some teams will have a more advantageous path. It happens in the NCAA tournament. It happens in the NFL. Didn't it kind of happen, in the NBA this year? Didn't people say the Celtics had the easiest path to the NBA finals in the history of the sport? So, it happens. But that's also happenstance. And the good news is that when teams do get screwed, unless it's your favorite team, it's going to result in an awesome game for us. So, it's not that broken. And guess what? Winning a national championship is supposed to be the hardest thing to do. And if it's hard, then it's going to be hard. Like, I don't really have a lot of patience for, like, oh, we got screwed in seeding. You think that Georgia wanted to play Ohio State in the first round of the 14 field 2 years ago?
Nope.
But Ohio State on paper was the 4th best team because they lost to Michigan and their record was worse. But do you think they were worse than TCU? It happened already.
Georgia knew if they beat Ohio State, they were winning national.
Yeah, so they got screwed in their seeding, and they were the number 1 seed 2 years ago and won the national title. So it doesn't matter so. Yeah, that's my piece on it.
Next question. Willie sent us a video.
Dear Andy and Ari, I have 2 questions for you. And yes, Ari, that is me proudly displaying both of my Houston Astros championship replica rings. Because as a real fan, we don't care what anybody else thinks about our championships. You still have to call us champions. Question number 1, is there an update on Les Miles and his vacated wins and trying to get into the Hall of Fame? And then 2, which is actually my real big question, is with everything that's going on that's changed with the numbers of scholarships and coaches being on the field, I've noticed a pretty significant trend of G5 players having success at the P4 level, but not so much in the reverse. So I think that could start to create a little bit of a distance or gap in the talent. But then also with now the opportunity for G5 coaches to be on the field and actually make a significant name for themselves in the P4 as an assistant or an analyst, I think that's also going to continue to see a lot of those coaches really move up to the P4 ranks. So my question is, in how long of a time are we going to see where there just becomes so much of a gap between the G5 and the P4 that they really aren't even in the same conversation anymore? And maybe even hopefully getting the G5 their own playoff system.
Okay, so we got 2 questions from Willie. We'll start with question 1. The Les Miles. There's no update on Les Miles and his lawsuit to try to get his vacated wins back. Remember, the Hall of Fame, the College Football Hall of Fame, you have to have a 600 lifetime winning percentage, and Les Miles is just below that because of the games that got vacated at LSU. Now, if Les Miles had never chosen to go to Kansas, he'd still be above that threshold, even with the vacated wins. So we'll see what happens with that. But to Willie's other question about the gap between the power conferences and the group of 5, it's a very different question, or a much more interesting question now than when Willie sent it yesterday. because
for sure, because
because
of the
it's
Pac-12 stuff.
exactly. So now we kind of get to see that in real time. Like they're going to try to say we're a power conference because we have the name of what used to be a power conference. Will anybody buy that?
I don't know, man. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think they will look at the lineup and say, you've got Oregon State and Washington State, two programs that occasionally were good in the Pac-12, but weren't always good in the Pac-12. And then you've got a bunch of Mountain West teams, and then whoever else you add, whether that's somebody from the American or somewhere else, or if you were to get Cal and Stanford back somehow. I don't think if you put that side by side with the Big 12, you put that, we'll see what the ACC would look like in that scenario because we don't know with Florida State and Clemson what's going to happen.
It's like take bubbling down here, and it's just like it's
bubbling,
bubbling,
okay.
It's bubbling,
But
it's bubbling,
is that anything like the Big 10 and the SEC? No, not even close.
Can I say something that might be really offensive? I'm a little nervous though.
When has that ever stopped you?
I'm going to whisper it.
Oh boy.
What's the distinction between the Big 12 and the new Pac-12?
The Big 12 has better teams.
They're, in my opinion, a power conference is a conference or a group of teams, because when the Power Five was instituted, that had 1, 2, or more national powers that were an absolute top tier program.
So wagons. Okay, so you need national title.
I think you need wagons in your conference because the wagons beaten along the way legitimize you, or they win your conference and legitimize the conference. But if you don't have either, like, I'm not saying that the new Pac-12 that is just being introduced now is got better programs than the Big 12. That's not my point. But we are going to have a conversation, and we just asked about the distinction between power and non-power conferences. And I do think at a certain point, we are going to have to call into question why the Big 12 continues to keep that banner when they don't have a wagon in their conference. Like, what is the distinction between half of the Big 12? Well, like why does UCF get to carry their own a power conference banner, but Boise doesn't? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and that's what's going to happen. And so what Willie says with the G5 playoff, I definitely could see something like that. Listen, I think we're headed toward a super league, whether we want it or not. And I think there's going to be another level between the Super League and the FCS that will be everybody else. And I don't want it to be that way. I think a lot of people are trying, they're trying to cobble this together. And that's why the Big 12 and the ACC are treated the way they're treated right now, where they are in this kind of elevated status, because there are a lot of people, even people in charge of the sport. I know everybody thinks they're all just going for the money and they're all trying to ruin the sport. But I think there are a lot of people who want to keep as many programs involved as possible.
But what do you think is the better system? What do you think is the better system? Having a G5 playoff where there's a champion at that level, or including them in an unwinnable playoff?
Well, they just want the money from the unwinnable playoff.
Okay.
So I wouldn't turn that down if I'm them.
Yeah.
Because if you do your own playoff, you don't get that money anymore.
Yeah, and I see people here in the comments, Andy, like saying the dude just compared the Big 12 to the new Pac-12. I understand the distinction that the Big 12 has better programs in it right now. I understand that. That's not what I was saying. Do you understand what I was saying?
I do understand.
Clear enough, or do I need to explain
what you're
it
saying?
Again?
Is there are no perennial national title contenders in the Big 12 like there are in the SEC.
And I don't know if it's fair that the Big 12 gets to be on even footing with the SEC and the Big 10 and even the ACC to a certain extent.
Well, the ACC, as long as it has,
as it's currently constructed, because it's like you get the same perks of all the teams that have to go through things that are much harder than you.
Yeah.
Like running the table in the ACC is much easier than running the table in the SEC. Obviously, that's just a fact. But also, if you run the table and you're Duke and you beat Clemson, Louisville, NC State, Florida State, and Miami along the way, then that legitimizes you as a person or a program, not a person, a program that deserves one of the top 4 spots. And I'm not necessarily sure that going on. I mean, the Big 12 is probably the most competitive up to bottom top to bottom conference in America in terms of not knowing who's going to win the conference. But that doesn't mean that anybody's outstanding. It means that everybody's similarly good. Like
Right.
that. So like, and there's two different things.
Right.
So
there's nobody in the top that you would feel like is in the top
if Kansas
5.
State loses
But
one
there's
game,
a lot that you feel like are in the top 15 through 40.
yeah. So
Yeah.
so and it's not easy to go undefeated. I'm
Yeah.
not belittling the Big 12 if somebody does that. And if they do, they'll be represented in the playoff. And in the past, it was still the same. I know UT and Oklahoma were there. The Big 12 was still viewed a little bit lower than everybody else, and they could get into the playoff as a champion. I'm not saying they shouldn't be included in the system, but I do think that we have to call it like it is and just say the Big 12 is reaping a lot of playoff benefits despite the fact they don't have a wagon in their conference. Is that like not a fair thing to say or think?
No, it's a fair thing to think.
Okay.
It's absolutely fair.
Okay.
Speaking of the Big 12.
Yeah.
There's a Big 12 team on the road tonight. Guys,
Can't wait.
the Party School Bowl is happening in San Marcos, Texas tonight. We're not going to talk to you again till probably after the Alabama-Wisconsin game. But hang with us on social media. We'll be tweeting through this one on Thursday night. Huge games on Friday night, by the way. Arizona, Kansas State.
One of the games of the weekend. I'm going to say it.
That's gonna be
it's one of the games of the weekend.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. And also, UNLV Kansas should be a lot of fun. So, guys, your weekend, it starts now. You can just go home, quit working. We'll talk to you on Saturday.